The next P in the four P's of marketing that we're going to examine is pricing. Pricing is often not really considered part of the marketing strategy. We tend to think of pricing being driven by the finance and accounting people in an organization. But in fact, pricing is one of the critical components of a marketing strategy, and it has a lot uh, of clout or weight in how consumers perceive products. What is a price? A price is the total value that a customer exchanges for the benefit of using or having a particular product or service. There are a variety of different pricing strategies. Um, one, some are customer value based, which is pricing based on the buyer's perception of the product, whether that perception is based on facts and real information or whether it's based purely on speculation is irrelevant. It's how customers value the product. Cost-based pricing basically prices products based on the seller's cost, adding a little bit of a markup in there so the company can make a profit, but basically the costs of producing the product is what drives the price. Or competition-based pricing, which is pricing your product based on what your competitors do, either pricing comparatively with your competitors, pricing a little bit higher to convey a higher quality, or pricing a little bit lower than your competitors to hopefully increase volume sales. Some things that you want to consider when setting your price. You do want to take a look at your customers' perceptions of value. How do they interpret or perceive the value that's embedded into your product? You can't price a product higher than the way in which consumers value your product. At the other end of the spectrum, you have to look at product costs. You can't price your product below the cost of production unless, otherwise you'll lose money. Now, there are instances in some cases where for a very, very short period of time, companies will price their products below the cost of production to generate interest or sales, uh, volume related revenue. But you can't do that in the long run because ultimately it means you're losing money. Value-based pricing versus cost-based pricing. It's important to recognize that you need to be somewhere in the middle here, that it's very hard to get a true sense of value-based pricing, what customers are willing to pay, because obviously if you simply ask your customers, they're going to tell you a lower price. And of course you don't want to be using cost-based pricing exclusively because costs do change over time. Costs can change in terms of cost per unit based on the volume that you sell. So it's not a perfect indicator of establishing a price. So we're going to take a look now at some pricing strategies, taking a look at the customer's needs, um, what they derive as value, uh, the overall benefits that we perceive that we're getting equals the price that we're willing to pay. Uh, high overall, overall benefits equal the same or higher prices. Some considerations for cost-based pricing include um, what markup you're going to use. And typically most industries have a standard markup in their pricing model, so that's an important thing to consider. Some companies take a look at break-even pricing. We don't really necessarily need to make money right now, but we want to at least cover our costs. So that would be a break-even pricing strategy. Again, most companies don't do that in the long run. They do it for a very short period of time, usually to achieve some other kind of organizational goal. And sometimes companies set a target return on pricing, meaning they have an established return on investment that they are looking to get, and they price their product based on that targeted return on investment. Competition-based pricing, taking a look, The competition helps frame a customer's reference point. We as consumers have a general price point in mind when it comes to buying products in certain categories. We know roughly what a product should cost, and so as consumers, we use that frame of reference to sort of evaluate the different potential products in the marketplace that might satisfy our needs. And we are willing to look at prices that or products that deviate from that price frame of reference, but you have to give us a very compelling reason why we should deviate from that frame of reference. You also can look at competitors' offerings, their marketing positions, and their strengths and weaknesses, and decide where you want to be relative to that competition. Do you want to price above your competition to convey a higher level of quality? Do you want to compete directly with them based on price? Sometimes that can be a good strategy. Or do you want to price below your competitors to generate interest and short-term volume sales that ultimately might lead to consumers switching and being more loyal to your particular brand? There's some things that you may want to think about when you're setting your prices. Internal to the organization, you need to look at the company's strategy and overall objectives. You need to look at the other elements of the marketing mix, and do all the 4 P's of marketing fit together to tell a compelling and logical story? You can't, for example, position your product in the minds of consumers as being a super high quality, innovative product, and then you use a pricing strategy that conveys a low price, um, uh, that doesn't sort of align with all the other elements of the marketing mix. All 4 of those components do need to fit together to tell a single, logical, compelling story. You want to think about the desired position you want to hold in the minds of consumers. Do you want to be known as the low cost or low price alternative in the marketplace, or do you want to be known as being competitively priced, or do you want to be known as being higher priced, which then conveys to consumers a higher level of quality? And you also have to think about your brand and what your brand has come to represent in the minds of consumers. Outside of the organization, you want to look at the overall marketplace and overall demand for your product. You want to understand price elasticity. What happens when prices change in your product category? How quickly do consumers respond to those price changes? You want to look at the economic conditions. Is the economy booming right now, and do people have lots of disposable income and therefore might be a little bit less price sensitive? Or is it tough economic times and consumers are really looking for good value for dollar when they spend their money? What kind of regulations come into play when it comes to pricing your product? And that could be really important when it comes to certain types of products. In PEI, for example, gasoline prices are regulated, electricity prices are regulated, milk prices are regulated, and so you need to understand what kinds of legal parameters you have to work within. And you also may want to think about social awareness and concern. Does your product have a social imperative? Do consumers feel there's a societal benefit to having these kinds of products competitively priced in the marketplace? So take a look at post-secondary education or university. There's a reason why the prices are roughly where they are. We typically like to see them a little bit lower when it comes to students and affordability, but we do also, so we work very hard to make sure that any tuition increases that we impose on students are as small as we can make them, and also justifiable based on the economic conditions. There's 4 broad types of markets that you need to understand. Pure competition are those businesses that compete basically in the commodity market, and they are price takers. They don't have any say over what the price of their product is. The market decides, because there's really very little difference or no difference at all between the product produced by company A and the product produced by company B. So almost all commodities fit into this market. All agricultural products, those sorts of things, all fit into the pure competition model, and companies are simply price takers. Monopolistic competition are typical, most retail type situations where companies compete on a wide range of price points, and consumers are free to move between businesses as their desires lead them. So consumers have choice, and they assign a value to the various options that are available to them in the marketplace, and they basically are free to make their own decisions because there's lots of choice out there in the marketplace. Oligopolistic competition is when there's only a few competitors in the marketplace and they have an enormous amount of control and influence over the pricing of their products. So, for example, the oil industry is run by a few very, very, very large companies, and they really do control the lion's share of the market and can really use their position as oligopolistic competition to influence the prices and ultimately keep them a little bit higher. And a pure monopoly is when there's really only one competitor in the marketplace. They can set their own prices, and consumers have no choice but to purchase their products from them. So understanding price and quality, it's a really important relationship. There is an inverse relationship between price and quality, at least in the minds of consumers. The higher the price, the higher the quality. That's a sort of a general rule. I'll give you a perfect example. If we know nothing else about a product other than its price, and we have a frame of reference, we're familiar with the product category, so we have a frame of reference for what a product in that product category should cost, knowing the price of the product allows us very quickly to make some assumptions about the quality of the product. So let's say, for example, I have 2 hamburgers right in front of me. Both of them are covered in one of those hotel room service silver domes. So you can't actually see the hamburgers. All you know is that under each of the 2 covers, there's 2 hamburgers. One on the right side costs $1.99. The hamburger on the left side costs $30. You can immediately start to make some assumptions about those hamburgers based simply on the price point. I suspect that many of you, if you knew the hamburger cost $1.99, would think, okay, it's probably a fast food burger, very likely off the value menu. It's probably pretty tasty, but pretty standard fare, probably not that visually appealing. There might be a few toppings on it, but they're the standard lettuce, tomato, maybe some processed cheese, probably a fairly thin patty. That's what you'd expect to get for $1.99. If, however, you look at the left-hand side and you know that there's a burger underneath that silver dome that costs $30, you're probably making some assumptions about that burger as well. You're probably thinking, well, this is a burger that's sold not in a fast food restaurant, but in a sit-down restaurant where there's table service. The ingredients in that particular burger are probably a little bit higher quality. Maybe it's organic grass-fed beef. The patty's probably a little bit bigger. The bun is probably a gourmet artisanal bun. There's probably some wider variety of toppings on there. It might be good quality bacon. You might have some avocado, maybe even a fried egg. The burger on the left-hand side probably looks more appealing. It's probably put together so that's visually appealing. So again, without knowing anything other than the price of these 2 burgers, we're able to make some probably pretty accurate assumptions about the overall quality based purely on price. So things like if your economy is in a recession, or if there's a rapid amount of inflation or interest rates, all of these things affect consumer spending and consumers' perceptions of the product price. We're more willing to spend more money if the economic situation is really good, if inflation is relatively low, if interest rates are relatively low and we have access to borrow money. In comparison, when those economic conditions are tighter or more stringent, we as consumers make different type of consumer purchasing decisions. There are a couple of pricing strategies that are unique and specific to new products in the marketplace. And the first one's called market skimming. This is when you enter the market at a higher price than would be normally considered for a product in this category. And early on in the product life cycle, you try to skim as much profitability off the product by pricing it higher because the people who buy products early in the product's life cycle don't tend to be very price sensitive. This works really well when the product's quality and image ultimately support a higher price, and when the cost of low volume, in terms of the number of units that you're selling, doesn't necessarily cancel out the benefits of the higher price. It also helps to ensure that competitors cannot easily enter the market and undercut your price. In comparison, the opposite pricing strategy for a new product is called market penetration. This is when you enter the market at a lower price than where you typically think you're going to end up in the long run. And you do this to encourage or stimulate early demand, to get people to buy into or buy the product as early as possible in the product life cycle, because you want to get people purchasing the product and in the habit of purchasing the product. You do this when the market is price sensitive. You do it when costs ultimately will fall as volume increases. And you can do this to help keep the market competition out of the marketplace. Some other pricing strategies that you might want to look at: product line pricing. We talked about product lines in the last lecture series. When you have multiple products in your product line, the various price points of the different products has to make sense. When you buy a little tiny can of Coke, it should cost less than buying a big jug of Coke. Now, many of you might point out that that's actually not always the case. Sometimes the larger jugs of Coke are actually less expensive than the smaller bottles of Coke. And I would argue you are correct, but the reason is not because you're paying for the product itself, but because you're paying for the convenience of buying it. Typically, smaller sized bottles of soda at a convenience store are priced higher than the big jugs would be at a supermarket. And the reason that is because what you're paying for is not the product itself, but it's the convenience of buying the product at a convenience store. Optional product pricing includes pricing strategies that involve optional products that are sold along with the main product. So, for example, how many of you have a cell phone? I suspect it's most of you. How many of you have a case that goes over to protect your cell phone? The case would be an optional product, a product that is very typically purchased at the same time or closely to the same time as the main product, and the pricing strategies that you use when you price optional product pricing must take into account the cost of the main product as well. Captive product pricing: these are products that must be used at a certain time or with the main product. When you go to a professional sporting event, like a baseball game or a hockey game, there's a reason that you pay $15 for a hot dog and a soda. The reason is because you have no choice but to purchase your snacks from the vendors in the arena or stadium that you're in. You are being basically held captive. You must purchase those products, if you're going to purchase them at all, during the time when you're at the stadium. And therefore, they can charge you exorbitant pricing because you don't have any choice other than to buy the products from them, because you're basically held captive. It's the same thing with popcorn at a movie theater. Sure, you can sneak in your own treats if you want, but if once you're in the movie theater and you want popcorn, they can charge you that really high price because it goes along with, you have to buy it along with experiencing the movie. Byproduct pricing are prices of byproducts that ultimately make the main product's price more attractive. That one is when it's sort of like optional product pricing. In this case, though, instead of the byproduct being desirable, it's very often a waste product. So, for example, at any of the fish plants or lobster processing plants in PEI, the waste that is produced when canning lobster are basically the shells. The shells are then sold to local farmers to use as fertilizer in the plant. And basically, the company's not trying to make money selling the shells to farmers. They're just trying to recover their costs and make a little bit of extra money to ultimately help the bottom line of the company. Product bundle pricing is when you buy multiple things together and they're sold at a lower price in combination than if they were bought separately. And that includes every combo menu item at a fast food restaurant would be an example of product bundle pricing. Some other price adjustment strategies include discounts that could be cash discounts. If you pay cash, you get a better price. It could be quantity. If you buy one, it's $1, but if you buy three, it's $2.50. It could be seasonal discounts, so we're coming up to Halloween season, or we're coming up to Christmas season, or any other holiday where we often see steep discounts in certain types of products. You can also have allowances. If you trade in your car when you buy a new one, you can get a trade-in allowance, or there could be promotional allowances that are tied into a specific marketing campaign. You can segment your pricing, selling a product at two or more prices where the price difference is not based on differences in costs. So for example, when you go to the movie theater, there's different pricing. There's prices for students, there's prices for adults, and there's prices for seniors. And those price differences are not based on anything related to the cost of manufacturing the product. You can segment based on consumer segment, like age, seniors, students. You can segment based on product form. So it could be the different ways in which you can package the product might be a way to segment the pricing. Location-based pricing, again, if you were at a local, not a local, but a Major League Baseball stadium, and you were to go outside the stadium to the convenience store down the street, you would pay a lot less for a bottle of soda than you would if you were in the stadium itself. So the location of the pricing of the product or where it's being sold can influence the pricing. And time-based pricing, happy hour pricing for appetizers or for drinks at a local restaurant is an example of time-based segmented pricing. Some companies choose to use psychological pricing practices because, believe it or not, there are some customers who want to pay more for a product because they derive personal satisfaction from paying a higher price. And so some companies deliberately charge very, very high prices because there's a segment of the market out there, the segment that they're trying to go after, that is not price sensitive and actually wants to pay a super premium price for the products. They derive value from paying that extra high price. There's other kinds of price adjustment strategies, include discounts, including loss leaders, which means that you advertise a product for sale that's below the cost of production with the intention of getting people into your store who will then buy other products where you'll make money. Special event pricing, which could be grand opening or anniversary sales or holiday related sales. You could offer cash rebates. Low interest financing, we see that a lot from car dealerships or furniture stores that offer no interest, no payment for a period of time, or very, very low interest financing. Some offer longer warranties as a part of their pricing strategy, or free maintenance. It could be free oil changes or whatever if you buy a new vehicle. There could be some price adjustments based on geography. We do pay a little bit more for products in PEI. It's not all tied to the increased cost in shipping. There's some other reasons why we do pay a little bit more in PEI. There's also international pricing and the way you price your product in different countries based on different currencies. And if you want to take a quick look at a perfect example of how international pricing works, Google the Big Mac price index, and you will see the price of Big Mac, McDonald's hamburgers, in countries all around the world, and they convert it all to a common US dollar, so you can actually compare the pricing, and you'll notice that in some countries, Big Macs are incredibly cheap, and in other countries they're very, very expensive, and so all of that would take into account international pricing strategies. Dynamic pricing allows prices to fluctuate or change as customer demand or situations change. Things like hotels, airlines, car rentals, they track people's inquiries online and what they're booking online, and they make adjustments to their pricing based on that internet activity, or not just the internet activity, but activity in general. And so the price of one airline ticket on one day may actually be very different than that exact same ticket a week later. And so you need to understand how dynamic pricing works. It's very, very beneficial to marketers, and it's really derived based on our internet usage and tracking the information on internet databases to see what tickets or what hotel rooms or what travel destinations are really popular at a certain time. The benefits to consumers is it does allow us to offer some. There are some resources out there that allow us to compare prices so that we know if we're getting the best possible price when dynamic pricing is in play. Price cuts. We may see price cuts in prices due to excess capacity. At the end of a season, when you have leftover inventory, you may cut the prices just to get rid of the inventory. You may actually experience falling demand, and so you want to reduce the price so that you can hopefully get rid of the product or slightly increase demand, because again, if prices go down, demand typically goes up. And it could also be a drive to dominate the market. If you cut your prices, Domino's Pizza does this in Charlottetown. They cut their prices to ultimately be the pizza leader in the community, and very few other pizza restaurants in Charlottetown can compete on volume, and they can't compete on price either. So Domino's is dominating the market in Charlottetown. Price increases may be due to things like cost inflation, the rising costs of the goods that go into making a product, and so as a result, the cost of the product itself has to go up. Or it could be over demand. If demand is higher than the actual supply of the product, the price can go up, and this happens a lot around Christmas time. If there's a really, really hot toy in the marketplace where there isn't enough of the toy to go around to all the people who want to purchase it, what will happen is the price of the product will go up because of over demand. The way buyers react to price changes is not always as expected. Sometimes they react very favorably, but in some cases, changes in price can change people's perceptions about the brand. So you want to think very carefully about making changes to your pricing strategy, because yes, it may have a short-term benefit for your organization, but it may ultimately have some long-term cost to your organization in terms of the perceived value the customers think that they're getting. Competitors may react to your price change by matching your price reduction. That's not a good thing. If all of a sudden every other pizza restaurant in Charlottetown reduce their prices to the same rate that Domino's is selling their pizza for, it would cause a major problem for all of those companies. It would cause problems for Domino's because they wouldn't be able to compete on volume sales, and it would cause problems for a lot of the other pizza restaurants who simply would be selling their product below the cost of production. Some competitors may raise the perceived value of its offerings. They may be perceived as better quality if their price is higher than yours. And you may end up launching a price war with your competitors, and that's not a good thing. Nobody really wants to be in a protracted or prolonged price war. In the end, usually nobody wins that sort of situation.